My name is Nora Bennett. I was 37 when my family sat across from me at my grandfather's will reading, accepted a financial estate worth $7.4 million, and watched the lawyer slide a $5 bill toward me like it was a joke with paper edges. My mother smiled before I even touched it. My father muttered, "Build your own life for once." My sister lifted her paperwork like a trophy. Then my mother said, loud enough for the room, "Not every child turns into something worth investing in." I thanked the lawyer, folded the bill, and stayed quiet because I knew there was still another envelope on his desk. My grandfather had written one final letter, and he had ordered it read aloud. Less than a minute after the lawyer began, my mother's smile vanished. 5 years before that room, I was teaching vocational business and woodworking at a public high school about 90 miles west of where I grew up. I liked the work. I liked the students. I liked knowing my days had a shape. I thought I had found the life I was going to keep. Then Grandpa Walter went down hard. What followed matters, because my relatives never bothered to learn the shape of it. I became the person who sees a problem, fixes it, and then makes the fatal mistake of assuming decent people will notice. Humanity, as usual, had other plans. I did not make announcements. I did not post exhausted little martyr updates. I did not turn every sacrifice into a family newsletter. I simply went where I was needed. My grandfather, Walter Bennett, owned Bennett Supply and Lumber, a hardware and lumber shop that had been part of our town for more than 5 decades. It stood near the center of Ashford Ridge, beside an old feed store, and across from a diner that had changed owners 3 times but never changed its pie. People from 2 counties knew Bennett Supply. When I was small, I did homework behind the counter while Grandpa Walter copied keys, sharpened blades, and slipped butterscotch candies to kids whose parents came in for bolts or fence wire. That store was the most reliable thing in my childhood. More reliable than my parents' marriage. More reliable than my father's promises. More reliable than my mother's mood. So when Grandpa Walter's health failed and someone had to keep both the shop alive and the man himself protected, I did not call a family summit. I resigned from my teaching job near the end of the semester, packed my apartment into my hatchback, and moved into the guest cottage behind the old farmhouse. My mother, Diane Bennett, told her friends I had lost direction. My father, Mark Bennett, avoided the subject. My younger sister, Megan Bennett, said she wished she could help, then kept living exactly as before. None of them asked what the days looked like. They would learn later, in the office of a man paid to speak slowly over legal paper. The store matters because the store was the center of everything. Bennett Supply opened at 5:45 every morning, not at 6, not around breakfast, but 5:45 exactly, because farmers and contractors started early and Grandpa believed a town business was a promise with a door on it. If you said you would be open, you opened. Even when you were tired. Even when the weather was ugly. Even when nobody clapped, which is apparently disappointing for some branches of my family tree. After I returned, the front door became my responsibility. I unlocked the front door in the dark, switched on the lights, started the coffee, checked the register, swept sawdust from the previous afternoon, and laid out invoices before the first truck pulled into the lot. Then I went to the farmhouse, checked Grandpa's medication, made sure he had eaten, helped him dress if he needed it, and returned to the store before the morning rush. Some days he came in and sat on the stool by the counter, slower than before but still watching everything. One morning, while I was ringing up a rancher buying hinge screws and salt blocks, Grandpa looked at me and said, "You know who owns a place like this, Nora?" I laughed. "The person whose name is on the deed," he shook his head. "The person who opens it before the sun does." I mistook it for sentiment. It was not. He was telling me the answer years before anyone asked the question. Bennett Supply was not glamorous. Some months the profit looked like a rounding error after payroll, taxes, repairs, and insurance. But it employed 5 people in a town with too many empty storefronts. It gave people credit when their furnace died in January. It kept parts on hand that the big box stores 30 miles away never bothered to stock. To my mother and sister, it was an old retail shell sitting on saleable acreage. To my grandfather and me, it was the one family creation that had lasted. Those opposite versions of reality were eventually going to collide. Paperwork would do the impact. The fall happened on a Thursday in November, 5 years before the reading. Grandpa slipped near the loading bay while checking a pallet of roofing felt. At the hospital, they treated his bruised hip and sprained wrist, but the doctor noticed the tremor in his hand and the stiffness in his walk. Tests followed. Then came the diagnosis: Parkinson's. He was 82. The neurologist was gentle, but he did not decorate the truth. Grandpa could have good years ahead, but he would need increasing help. He could not keep running an old business and managing a progressive disease alone. Someone had to take over. I called my parents from the hospital hallway. My mother sighed as if illness were an inconvenient scheduling conflict. "That's terrible, sweetheart, but your father and I can't just uproot everything. We have responsibilities." Responsibilities, in her language, meant dinner reservations, golf friends, and a house too large for two people. Megan lived 75 minutes away in the city. No children, no spouse, and a job she described as unbearable every time she wanted sympathy. She said she would visit once things calmed down. Things did not calm down for Megan. They never do for people who benefit from chaos staying just far enough away. I stood by the vending machines with my phone in my hand and understood the arithmetic. 4 people could have helped. 1 person would. At first, I did not resent it. I loved my grandfather. I would have chosen him over lesson plans, faculty meetings, and fluorescent classroom lights every time. What grew slowly, month after month, was the anger that my family acted as if my return proved my life must have been smaller from the start. As if reliability meant I had fewer dreams. As if duty meant I was cheap. My parents visited Grandpa maybe twice a year, usually near holidays when an appearance could be folded into the family mythology. I began noticing what interested them during those visits. It was not his pain, not whether he was sleeping, not whether he was scared when his hands stopped obeying him. They wanted to discuss acreage. The first plainly revealing moment, my father stood at the farmhouse window, looking toward the 36 acres behind the store. "With that bypass extension coming," he said, pretending to speak to no one, "property like this won't stay quiet for long." My mother turned to Grandpa. "Walter, have you made plans for all of this? You don't want to leave a mess for the children." The children. She meant the money because humans enjoy using tender words as little curtains for greed. Grandpa looked at her over his coffee. "I've made arrangements, Diane, don't worry yourself." Then he glanced at me and winked. I did not understand the wink yet. Every visit followed the same path. How was the store doing? Had anyone appraised the acreage? Had he considered selling before the highway pushed prices higher? Did he really want to leave a burden behind? They painted hunger in the color of concern and expected us not to notice the brushstrokes. Grandpa always dodged them. I always returned to the store, opened the next morning at 5:45, and crushed his pills into pudding that night. I said nothing. That was partly patience and partly stupidity. Silence is noble right up until predators mistake it for permission. Megan appeared more frequently than my parents did, mostly because Megan ran out of money with the discipline of a leaking roof. She arrived every few months with a crisis. A transmission problem, a security deposit, a temporary gap, a credit card bill she described as if it had attacked her in an alley. She would wait until I was busy, find Grandpa alone, and leave with a check folded into her purse. I did not resent Grandpa for writing those checks. His cash, his heart, his decision. What got under my skin was how she described the place while taking from the man who built it. One afternoon, she stood in the parking lot, wearing sunglasses that cost more than my weekly groceries, and said, "I don't know how you can stand being trapped here. This sad little store eats money. You walked away from an actual career to babysit shelves." An hour earlier, that sad little store had sent an employee to open a stuck storm door for an elderly widow who could not get out of her kitchen. Grandpa's name was over that door. My sister pocketed his help and mocked his life's work in the same breath. Efficiency, apparently. I said something bland. I had a gift for bland. But as she drove away, I thought, you see a dead weight. I see the only thing in this family that ever did what it promised. Grandpa had heard her from the counter. The door had been propped open because the spring hinge needed replacing. He sat very still for a moment. Then he said, "Money passes through some people like rain through a cracked gutter. You hold things, Nora, that's not the same." I thought he was comforting me. He was leaving breadcrumbs. I kept stepping over them. The sentence my mother later repeated like a family hymn came during Christmas dinner 4 years before the reading. We were at the farmhouse because Grandpa tired easily and travel had become difficult. I cooked most of the meal, because of course I did. I also slipped away between the roast and dessert to help him take his evening medicine, because of course I did that too. Megan spent half the meal describing a senior strategy role that sounded suspiciously imaginary. My mother glowed at her like she had personally invented ambition. My father nodded on cue. Then the conversation found me like a flashlight turns toward a stain. "And how is the little shop, Nora?" my mother asked, with that light voice she used when she wanted everyone to hear pity without her having to admit it. "Steady," I said. "December's been busy." She gave a soft hum. "It still breaks my heart. You were a teacher, a respectable profession. Then you tossed it aside so you could act like a cashier in a town most people drive through without stopping." Nobody corrected her. Nobody said I was running payroll, ordering inventory, scheduling deliveries, handling accounts, repairing fixtures, and keeping Grandpa alive. My father cut his potatoes into smaller and smaller pieces. My mother sighed. "I love you, but some children never grow into their promise. That's just reality." The table went silent for 2 beats. Then my aunt asked for cranberry sauce, and the room moved on, because families are very good at burying a knife under polite conversation. I sat there tasting food I had cooked and understood exactly how my mother measured people. Titles, money, social polish. A story she could brag about without context. By her scale, Megan was impressive and I was a disappointment. The fact that I had reorganized my life around her father's care and his father's store did not enter the equation. I did not argue. I simply thought, one day someone is going to correct your math. I had no idea Grandpa had already started. That winter, Grandpa's worry sharpened. On his clear evenings, when the illness loosened its grip and gave him back to himself, he talked more directly. One night, we sat at the farmhouse kitchen table after I had closed the store. He had chamomile tea. I had the expression of a person who had been awake since 4:30 and was pretending to enjoy consciousness. "Nora," he said, "after I'm dead, they will move on the store." He did not need to define they. "I know. Your father will say selling the land is practical. Diane will call it fairness. Megan will want cash before the grass grows over me. They do not recognize what it means. They only picture the sale price." I stared at my hands. "I know." He looked toward the dark window, where the store lights reflected faintly from across the yard. "My father sold nails from a wagon. I turned that into a shop. I hoped someone after me would keep it alive. It won't be Mark, it won't be Megan." He turned back to me. "It has been you. 5 years of early keys and late books, I see it." Then came the question that divided my life into before and after. "If I arrange this so it lands with you and stays there untouchable, will you keep turning that key?" I did not feel triumph. That is the part people misunderstand. A legacy is heavy. A small-town business is not a treasure chest. It is a furnace that eats time, cash, sleep, and sometimes your entire personality if you let it. But it was his life's work. It was our town's morning light. It was something worth carrying. "Yes," I said. Then I added the thing that later made my mother accuse me of plotting. "But if we do this, we do it clean. So clean nobody can say you were confused, pressured, or sick-minded when you chose." Grandpa smiled. "You've gotten careful. I learned from watching them circle your property." The smile faded. He nodded once. I could predict my family's response if the store showed up as a gift in the will. They would say Parkinson's had damaged his judgment. They would say I isolated him. They would say I whispered poison during weak moments. They would hire someone with a polished tie to make me look like a greedy granddaughter who exploited an old man. And maybe, because the world occasionally mistakes volume for truth, they could drag us through years of court. Truth is not self-protecting. It needs walls. So we found a lawyer with no family connection, an attorney who handled property transfers and estates named Samuel Price. I insisted Grandpa meet with him privately. I took him to Samuel's office and sat in the waiting room staring at a bowl of mints that had probably been there since the Clinton administration, because I did not want anyone later claiming I had coached him. Grandpa met with Samuel alone. Then he met with him again. Then Samuel arranged for Grandpa's doctor, Dr. Elaine Porter, to document his capacity in writing. Grandpa teased me about the layers of protection. You planning a bank robbery or a store transfer? Given our relatives, there's a difference. He laughed until he coughed, then patted my hand. Build the wall high, then. Samuel did. 18 months before the will reading, while Grandpa still had mornings clear enough to get himself across town, he did not put Bennett's supply and lumber into his will. That would have left it vulnerable. Instead, Samuel structured a formal sale. Grandpa sold the business and the 36 acres to me at appraised value through a buy-sell agreement. I did not have hundreds of thousands of dollars lying around. Shocking, I know, teachers and caregivers not casually sitting on treasure piles. So I signed a promissory note. I would pay over time using store profits, my wages, and every ounce of labor I was already giving. The transfer was not a gift, it was a purchase. A burden with signatures, a promise secured by debt. Dr. Porter examined Grandpa on the day he signed and wrote that he understood the transaction, the property, the consequences, and the people involved. Samuel had witnesses. He had notarized signatures. He kept originals. He built a file thick enough to make a tantrum bounce off it. When it was done, Grandpa shook my hand across Samuel's conference table. There, he said. Now they can howl at the moon, the deed won't howl back. I told no one. For 18 months, I kept opening the store at 5:45. People later asked why I let my mother keep calling me a failure when I already owned the thing she wanted. The answer was not weakness. It was timing. If I told them while Grandpa was alive, the war would begin while he was still vulnerable. My mother would corner him during bad days. Megan would cry about fairness. My father would beg for peace because begging other people to absorb conflict was his personal hobby. They would pressure him to undo it, and even if they failed, the stress would punish him. Worse, every month that passed after the signing gave them more room to argue he had declined. The strongest proof was the record from the day itself, dated, witnessed, certified. The transaction was safest if nobody attacked it until Grandpa was gone and the document stood frozen in time. So I swallowed the insults. I listened while my family discussed what should happen to the acreage. I let them imagine themselves generous for planning how to divide something that was no longer theirs. I made Grandpa oatmeal. I managed inventory. I fixed a jammed planer. I sat beside him through tremors and bad nights. I said nothing. It was lonely in a way that does not photograph well. Caregiving is not one heroic scene. It is 1,000 small humiliations you refuse to let the sick person feel. I learned his medication schedule by instinct. I learned which stories comforted him when his body scared him. The tornado of '81. The first summer sale. The night he met my grandmother at a school fundraiser and pretended he knew how to dance. I helped him bathe when he could not manage it. I trimmed his nails. I changed sheets at 2 in the morning. I never once let him apologize for needing help, because shame is a cruelty people add when nature has already done enough damage. Meanwhile, Megan posted beach photos from San Diego with captions about choosing joy. My mother mailed a birthday card and did not visit. My father called once, asked if Grandpa was stable, then changed the subject to the property tax assessment. I am not listing this for applause. Applause does not refill prescriptions. I am saying it because those same people would later sit in Samuel Price's office and speak as if they had special knowledge of what Grandpa wanted. None of them had held his hand during a tremor that lasted 10 minutes. None of them had heard him cry because he could not button his own shirt. But they were ready to inherit. That kind of nerve should require a license. Toward the end, during one of those rare lucid evenings, Grandpa handed me a small metal box. It was blue, dented near the hinge, and had once held peppermint bark from some Christmas gift basket. He had hidden it beneath folded sweaters in the lowest drawer. He placed it in my hands like it weighed more than it did. "When Samuel calls everyone in," he said, "bring this. Don't show it until he's finished. And promise me Samuel reads every word of my letter where they can hear it. No matter what they do. I promise. What's in the box?" His eyes brightened with the old counterman's smile, the one he wore when he had already made the sale and was waiting for the customer to catch up. "A little insurance, and a little truth in case they've misplaced theirs." 13 days after that, he died in his own bed, with the morning store key still in my coat pocket because I had opened at 5:45 like always. His last sentence was not grand. He asked whether the new blade guards had arrived. I told him they had. He nodded, satisfied, as if every important matter had been handled. It had. After he died, I sat with him until the room changed from his room into a room without him. Then I went back to the cottage, put the metal box on my kitchen counter, and stared at it until the sun came up. I had promised to wait. I almost did. 2 nights before the reading, I opened it. I needed to understand what I would be bringing into that office. Inside were 3 items. The first item was the duplicate of the buy-sell agreement transferring Bennett's supply and lumber and the 36 acres to me 18 months earlier. Grandpa's signature. My signature. Samuel Price's stamp. The date printed clearly from a day when nobody could credibly claim Grandpa did not understand his own name. The second was Dr. Elaine Porter's capacity letter on medical letterhead, confirming he grasped the sale, its meaning, and its consequences when he signed. A wall in 2 pages. The third was a handwritten note on a torn sheet from the store's order pad. His handwriting was shaky, but every word was legible. "The store belongs to the one who opens it before sunrise." I did not change my mind at the end. I made this decision while I could still drive there myself. Anyone who calls it pressure should ask why they were never in the passenger seat. Love, Grandpa Walter. I sat at the kitchen table and did not cry. Something in me simply settled. For years, my family had spoken about me as if I were a lesser version of what a person should be. Grandpa had seen me exactly, not generously, accurately. That mattered more. He had not gave me the store through a will. People later described it that way, and I corrected them every time. He sold it to me while he was alive, clear, documented, and represented by counsel. He let my family spend 18 months counting a treasure chest that had already been moved out of the room. The $5 they would hand me was not the insult. It was the setup. There were 2 separate worlds in Grandpa's estate. First, there was money, investment accounts, bank savings, and an insurance payout. Together, they came to roughly $7.4 million. Grandpa left that to my parents and Megan. He did love them. He also knew exactly what they valued. The other world was the business and acreage. The name, the doors, the morning trucks, the acres they were already mentally carving into sale lots. That was not in the will because it no longer belonged to Grandpa when he died. It belonged to me, bought through a formal sale I was still paying for. The will gave me $5 so nobody could say he had forgotten me. To my family, who knew nothing about the sale, it would look like judgment. The dutiful granddaughter, the one who cooked, cleaned, managed, lifted, sat, and stayed, would receive a bill small enough to buy gas station coffee. My mother would enjoy that. Megan would enjoy that. My father would not enjoy it exactly, but he would allow it, which has always been his preferred method of harm. And after that, Samuel would open the second envelope. I decided I would not defend myself during the first part. I would not correct them early. I would let them reveal themselves completely. Grandpa's letter could answer what I had spent years swallowing. The funeral came first. I handled the arrangements because apparently death still requires logistics and the dead do not file their own forms. Flowers, photos, food, calls to distant relatives. Notices, music, the slideshow, chairs for the reception. My mother arrived looking beautifully shattered, which is a talent of hers. Megan uploaded a monochrome photo of Grandpa on social media and called him the man who taught me everything, which would have been more convincing if she had visited him more than 5 times in 5 years. At the service, they accepted condolences like they had been stationed at the center of his life. I stayed near the back beside the people who had known him in real life. The contractors, the farmers, the cashier who had worked weekends since she was 16, the widow whose storm door we had fixed, the retired mechanic who still came in for coffee. They all said some version of the same thing. He was proud of you, Nora. He knew you kept it going. That store survived because of you. My family heard none of it because they were standing where the performance was better lit. At the gathering afterward, my mother found me near the coffee urn. For one foolish second, I thought grief might make her honest. Instead, she leaned close and said, "I hope you aren't expecting much. Walter believed in people making something of themselves. Choices have consequences." There it was again, dressed for mourning. She patted my arm. "Try not to make tomorrow painful. Megan has enough stress." I looked at her and thought of the metal box on my kitchen counter. The silence I had carried for 18 months no longer felt heavy. It felt loaded. In the days before the reading, my parents worked hard to prepare me for my supposed disappointment. My father called and said, "Your grandfather admired achievement. The will may reflect that. Don't take it as cruelty." My mother was less polished. "Megan has real expenses. If the estate helps her more, it's because she'll use it properly. I don't want tears or accusations in Samuel's office." She was afraid I would make a scene. This was rich, coming from a family that had made a lifestyle out of quiet, emotional vandalism. "There will be no scene," I told her. That part was true. I would not shout. I would not grab paperwork. I would not plead. I was going to sit still and let a dead man with excellent documentation ruin their mourning. The night before the reading, Megan came to my cottage. She had visited that cottage 3 times total, and one of those times she had needed me to sign for a delivery because she was hiding a purchase from a boyfriend. This time she brought wine and a soft expression. "I hate that we've drifted," she said, settling onto my sofa without asking. "Grandpa would want us close." I made tea and let silence do its work. People cannot resist filling quiet with their actual agenda. After 20 minutes of memories so vague they could have been assembled from greeting cards, she asked, "Did Grandpa ever give you anything to hold? Papers, instructions, anything like that? I just want tomorrow to be simple for everyone." There it was, not sisterhood, reconnaissance. I watched her over the rim of my mug. "Grandpa and I talked a lot, mostly about keeping the store open." That was the truth. It was also all she needed to hear to underestimate me again. Her shoulders relaxed. "That's sweet," she said, in the tone people use for children and furniture. She finished her wine and left the glass on my coffee table. I washed it after she drove away. Then I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, in the parking lot outside Samuel Price's office, my mother intercepted me before I reached the door. She wore a black dress, pearls, and the expression of a woman preparing to be magnanimous with money she had not earned. "Nora," she said, taking both my hands, "please let this be your sister's moment. She needs a win. You've always been independent, strong. You don't need things the way Megan does." There it was, the old family trick. When they wanted to cut me down, I was a failure. When they wanted me to accept less, I was strong. The insult and the compliment were the same leash. She squeezed my fingers. "Don't make this hard." I felt something in me go out, not violently, not dramatically. The last little pilot light of wanting my mother to see me. "I won't make it hard," I told her. She smiled, relieved, because she misunderstood me completely. Samuel's office smelled like paper, floor polish, and expensive restraint. He was precise, late 60s, silver-haired, exact, and immune to emotional theater. I had spoken with him earlier that week. He explained that the will would come first, then Grandpa's final letter, then provide the supporting documents if needed. I would not need to argue. Grandpa had wanted the record to speak in Samuel's voice, not mine. That mattered. If I rose and declared that I owned the store, my family would call it a grab. If a lawyer read a letter from the dead man who had completed the sale, backed by documents, it would land differently. Facts sound less hysterical when printed. Samuel had also told me something I kept repeating in my head that morning. You do not have to win an argument that has already been settled. That was harder than it sounds. I had spent years being trained to explain myself, then punished for explaining too much, then mocked for staying quiet. There was no setting in my family where I could simply be believed. At dinner tables, my mother could flatten a fact with a sigh. Megan could turn her needs into emergencies. My father could make surrender sound like maturity. But legal paper has one lovely advantage over family gossip. It does not care who looks most wounded while reading it. So I promised myself I would not perform pain for them. I would not make the first half easier by warning them, and I would not make the second half smaller by apologizing for it. Grandpa had arranged the order deliberately. First, they would show what they thought I deserved. Then he would show what he had known. I sat at the conference table between my Aunt Karen Lowell and an empty chair. My metal box rested in my bag by my feet. Across from me, my mother, father, and Megan arranged themselves like people attending a ceremony where the ending was already known. They did not realize they were not spectators. They were evidence. One thing happened the night before that I need to include because it was the closest my father came to honesty. After Megan left, Dad called. His voice was low and tired. Nora, he said, I understand you handled everything for him. The store, the doctor visits, the nights. I know I let you. I said nothing. I couldn't watch him become old, he continued. It scared me. You were better at it, so I told myself it made sense. For a moment, I thought there might be a door opening between us. Then he said, so please don't fight your mother tomorrow. Let us get through it peacefully. There it was. A confession wrapped around the same old request. He could see the truth. He could even name it. He just could not let it cost him comfort. I won't fight anyone, I told him. But I won't lie about what's true. He did not understand. He said good night. So that was the room. My mother certain, my father ashamed but seated beside her, Megan bright with anticipation, my aunt and uncle there as witnesses, and Samuel Price at the end of the table, folder in front of him full of consequences. I set the little metal box on the conference table without opening it. Megan noticed it immediately. My mother glanced at it and dismissed it. Probably some pathetic keepsake from the sentimental daughter in her mind. Let her think that. The originals were in Samuel's file. The box was only backup and Grandpa's last little flourish. Samuel offered condolences, adjusted his glasses, and began. We will start with the financial estate distribution, he said. Afterward, at Mr. Bennett's written instruction, I will read a separate letter addressed to those present. My mother folded her hands as if she were already accepting applause. Samuel read the will without drama. Investment accounts, savings, insurance. The total financial estate, approximately $7.4 million. The distribution, divided among Mark Bennett, Diane Bennett, and Megan Bennett, with Megan receiving the largest individual share. My sister's face flushed with pleasure she tried to disguise as grief. Then Samuel reached my name. To my granddaughter, Nora Bennett, I leave the sum of $5. He removed a crisp $5 bill from a small envelope and sent it across the table. The room paused. Then my mother laughed. It was small at first, hidden behind her fingers. Then it escaped fully, bright and pleased. Oh, Nora, she said, $5. Megan laughed too, a quick glittering sound, her inheritance papers held in both hands. My father did not laugh. He looked down, which was how he signed his name to things he did not want to own. My mother leaned toward me, unable to resist. I told you, sweetheart, not everyone becomes something worth investing in. My father added quietly, build your own life now, it may teach you something. I looked at the bill. I picked it up, folded it once, and placed it in my pocket. Thank you, Samuel, I said, that was all. I did not reach for the box. I did not defend myself. I let them enjoy the story they had rehearsed for years. Megan shining, Nora diminished, my mother proven right by the dead. Then Samuel reached for the next envelope. Before this meeting ends, he said, Mr. Bennet required that this letter be read aloud in full. My mother made a gracious little gesture. Please, we'd like to hear Walter's final words. She expected a sentimental farewell, a final blessing, maybe a sweet paragraph about family unity because greedy people enjoy assuming the dead have terrible timing. Samuel opened the envelope and began. To my family, he read. By now Samuel has explained the money. I hope it helps you. I left it where I believed it would be most valued. But the store needs explanation because the store was not mine to leave when I died. My mother's smile stopped moving. Samuel turned the page. 18 months ago, while I was still able to drive to this office myself, acting by my own choice and in full possession of my judgment, I sold Bennett's Supply and Lumber and the adjacent 36 acres to my granddaughter, Nora Bennett, at fair appraised value. Through a promissory note she continues to pay. Megan stared at him. Dr. Elaine Porter examined me that day and confirmed in writing that I understood the transaction and its consequences. The store does not appear in these papers because the sale was already finished. It belongs to Nora, bought in paper and in practice, morning after morning, long before any of you came to hear numbers read. The room had gone so quiet I could hear the hum of the ceiling vent. Samuel continued. I gave Nora $5 here not to insult her, but so none of you could claim I forgot her. I did not forget the person who opened my store, drove me to appointments, sat through my hard nights, and kept my name above the door. She is the only one I did not need to reward with cash because she had already earned the thing that mattered most. Samuel lowered his voice slightly for the final line. The store belongs to the one who opens it before sunrise. Signed, Walter Bennett. Nobody moved. Then my mother shot from her chair so quickly that it knocked backward into the wall. No, she said. Absolutely not. He was sick. She manipulated him. She pointed at me as if the gesture could become evidence. She had him isolated out there. She had access to everything. This is exploitation. This is theft. Megan's mouth opened and closed. My father sat frozen. My mother turned to him. Mark, say something. He said nothing. For the first time in my life, I watched certainty drain from her face and leave panic behind. I looked at her and said the sentence I had carried for 18 months. He wasn't manipulated, Mom. He was watching. Then I went quiet. Samuel let the room breathe, which is a polite way of saying he let my mother burn through the first round of outrage. When she paused, he placed documents on the table one by one. The executed buy-sell agreement, he said. Signed, witnessed, and notarized. The appraisal. The promissory note. Dr. Porter's capacity certification dated the same day. Copies are available to each of you. My mother looked at the papers as if hatred might edit them. Samuel spoke gently but firmly. Mrs. Bennet, you may consult any attorney you choose. I must tell you plainly, this is not a will provision to contest. It was a completed sale made during Mr. Bennet's lifetime, with medical documentation of capacity and independent legal counsel. My Uncle Thomas Reed, who had stayed silent all morning, picked up the doctor's letter, scanned it, and placed it back. Well, he said, looking at me, seems Nora measured up just fine. Megan started crying. Not grief, fury, her tears had sharp edges. So I get money, she said, voice shaking, and she gets the business and the acreage. That land will be worth more than the estate after the bypass comes through. How is that fair? There it was, finally. The truth without perfume. They had known the store was the real prize. They had mocked me for keeping it alive because they never imagined the person holding the keys might also hold the deed. My mother turned back to me, bitter and desperate. Then go earn your own. I did, I said. At 5:45 every morning for 5 years. My father covered his face with both hands. Nobody laughed. I could have walked out then. It would have been easy to leave them sitting there with the wreckage of their assumptions scattered among legal copies. But Grandpa had not built cruelty into the plan. He built clarity, so I stood slowly and said what I had come to say. I am not contesting the money. Grandpa left the financial estate to you, and I will not touch it, take every dollar. That was his choice. Megan looked up, confused, as if she had expected me to lunge for her check like we were in some badly written courtroom drama. Tempting genre, wrong woman. The store is mine, I continued. Not because I stole it. Not because I was gifted it in secret. Because I bought it in a documented sale and because I am still paying for it. I am not walking away rich, I am walking away responsible. I took the metal box from the table and slid it back into my bag. I had never needed to open it. If any of you walk into Bennett's Supply as relatives, I will treat you that way. Not like investors. Not like real estate scouts. Not as people waiting for me to fail so you can sell the ground out from under it. I turned to my mother. And nobody sitting here gets to use the word disappointment for me again. Then I left. For once, I was not the person who stayed behind to smooth the tablecloth, collect the cups, and make everyone else comfortable. I walked out first, through the reception area, into a clear, cold afternoon that looked offensively ordinary for a day when a family myth had just collapsed. I drove straight to Bennett's Supply. It was already past lunch, but I unlocked the front door anyway. I turned on the lights, stood behind Grandpa's register, and took the folded $5 bill from my pocket. I taped it underneath the counter, beside his handwritten note from the metal box. My mother did speak to 2 lawyers afterward. Both told her the same thing Samuel had told her. A completed sale with independent counsel, notarized documents, an appraisal, and same-day medical capacity certification was not a will contest waiting to happen. It was a closed door with very expensive hinges. Even my mother was practical enough not to spend her inheritance punching it. The next morning, I opened the store at 5:45. The key turned, the bell above the door gave its tired little ring, the coffee started, and the first truck pulled into the lot before sunrise. I switched on the sign with my grandfather's name still over the door, then stood for 1 second in the glow and let myself breathe.